The International Monetary Fund, strategic drawing rights. You're not going to want to miss this one. Stay tuned. Welcome. Now, we left off with the International Monetary Fund last time and giving you a real thorough description of what's taking place with global reserve currencies. Now, I know for a lot of us that seems dry, but I want to take a moment to kind of explain that we, the people of the United States, the reserve currency system is vital to understand because it really goes to the core of our purchasing power, goes to the core of our standard of living, goes to the core of what we will have or not have in the future. We're caught up in something, as we call it, the American dream. And you have to understand the American dream was born in 1971. Well, really born in 1971 when we came off the gold standard. And when we came off the gold standard, we kind of evolved into this expansion of credit. And we know because in 1971, folks, think of this. We only had $300 billion in circulation. Now, today, it's 1.3 trillion plus in paper and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions on digits. It's unbelievable. In 1971, we were really the world's largest creditor nation. Basically gave money to everybody. It's kind of how we paid everybody off, if you know what I mean. Well, today, we are the world's largest debtor nation. Well, in 1971, let's just say the baby boomers, not me, I'm a child of a baby boomer, but back in that time, the baby boomers were just beginning to go into the workforce and pay taxes. Now, they're one of the largest generations we have. Well, today, the baby boomers are coming off of not only contributing and paying taxes, they're now like tune of almost 10,000 a day, are coming off of the workload and paying taxes and now going on to unfunded liabilities. Just as I was talking about the locals with pension systems, where they promised things that they can't keep. You know, I like that story and for the CalPERS lady in California, for instance. That's happening all over the country. I know Detroit, they did it. They're taking pensions and they're reducing them. They're reducing the pensions down. So if you think you're going to get $4,000 for a pension, you might just get $1,500, maybe $1,800. I don't know about you, but that wouldn't sit well with me. I know Chicago is struggling a little bit too just recently. They just happen to be the latest. They had a major shortfall. They just decided to raise taxes through the roof, which is another way of doing it, but it doesn't solve the problem. Eventually, they're going to have that reckoning too. So pensions are vital to pay attention to because they're not possibly, maybe not be there for you. And they should be because that's actually one real handshake I promise to do for you if you do for me. You work for me and here's what you will get. To me, it's astonishing to see any pension be cut. But folks, we don't have a choice. Now that these baby boomers are coming off of paying taxes, going on to these unfunded liabilities, this is kind of where I'm getting at. Unfunded liabilities would be your Social Security, your Medicare, Medicaid. And you've got the politics on one side now wanting to do a universal health. Well, maybe they both do. Universal health. Now, sounds like a great idea. Was probably a great idea maybe at one point. Definitely not today. Now, personally, me, never a great idea because I don't want government in any form telling me what I can and cannot do and deciding to kill me off with a death panel. I don't need that. I would rather go and do what I want, see who I want, when I want, pay cash if I want. But the single-payer health system is an example. Now, why would we need that? Because we're broke. These liabilities of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the money's not there, folks. We've paid the tax. Social Security, we've paid the tax. I'm due my $400 a month for the rest of my life. That was kind of a joke. It's probably a little more. But still, we paid the tax. And yet, they don't have the money. They should have saved it, and they didn't. So the Medicare and the Social Security supposed fund to pay the future bills is not there. So as we talked about the debt and deficit, if we have 20 trillion in the hole now, The argument being we can just go into infinity. Well, not necessarily, because every 50 billion, oh, I'm sorry, put it this way, raising interest rates to it. Now, if we have, 20 trillion now, we have to pay interest on that debt. This is where the problem comes in. When they raise interest rates, every quarter point they raise adds $50 billion to the interest payment we have to pay on our debt. So you can't say guarantee a lot in this world, especially in finance, but one thing I could probably say with a good certainty, we're never going to see interest rates like we had before. It's impossible. At 5% interest right now in our society, we would have a staggering $1 trillion in interest payments alone, let alone principal. We can't afford it, folks. Now, we could always raise more taxes, but considering half the country doesn't pay taxes anyway, for the most part, raising taxes on the other half, they're already paying exorbitant amounts, as people in the bigger cities like New York and Chicago and such. So not only do they have staggering federal taxes, state taxes, local, county, and then you want to raise it, you see, raise Social Security payments, whatever it is. But if our Social Security is not there, and going forward, the youth aren't even making enough money to support those coming on retirement. So you see, we've kind of burned out our cycle. When we've gone through the 70s and the 80s, the baby boomers were a dynamic generation. They really did build, I think, a wonderful nation. Problem is, it was really after President Reagan, everything went downhill. It really just did. Just look at the numbers. I'll never forget the speech. I wish I had the video. I might have the video, and we're going to play it.
Before we reach the day when we can reduce the debt ceiling, we may, in spite of our best efforts, see a national debt in excess of $1 trillion. Now, this is a figure that's literally beyond our comprehension.
Think about that. Now we're at 20. The problem is it can't keep going because now we've reached a reckoning period, you see. And in that reckoning period, meaning it's stretched too far. Yeah, maybe we can go to 23, 25. They're raising the debt ceiling. I think they may have already done it by now, but they're raising it. So maybe we go to 25 trillion, maybe 30. But see, there comes a point where the interest on the payments alone on debt cannot be sustained. Now they can take more from us, but the more you tax those who produce, eventually the less they produce, you see. So when it comes to the reserve currency, the reckoning has to happen because the numbers tell you it has to happen. Timeline, again, I'm not so sure, but I have a feeling, and from a lot of my colleagues, and just for those who don't know, I know I'm in satellite now, and for those who don't know, I am an accredited asset management specialist. I did come from the financial world at A.G. Edwards. I had a Series 3 with commodities, 7, which is financial advisory, 63, 65, so I understand. I get the world from the fiat lens. I just saw the light, maybe it was when I was highly born again and on fire that I did, and I went into more hard, tangible assets, the real thing. But back in those days, we had the ability, you see. And so for us that are alive today, now I'm 49, but for us that are my age and above, we grew up in a world that was financed, financeable. We could get loans, we can get credit, we could buy a car. We could do anything we wanted to on credit. But we've come to a point of reckoning, and it can't really go back. Usually in history, when this takes place, that's why wars break out, or something else of a distraction. So I'm really under the contention that because of the reckoning that's coming to the systems in general, the Social Security system, the unfunded liabilities of Medicare going forward, it's not that medical costs are expensive or getting more expensive. It's the dollar doesn't buy you anything. And that's the most important thing. So if your dollar's not buying you anything, if the dollar over the generations is worse and worse in its ability to buy, if things like food and car batteries and clothing and books and college education, which isn't really worth it these days if you see what they're teaching these kids, then what do? We protect ourselves properly with constitutional forms of money, biblical forms of money. And I think we'll have a good chance of surviving. So I'm going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Terror terrorism, a volatile stock market, rising food costs, natural disasters. Every day our economy is at risk, but your assets should not be. Cornerstone Asset Metals is here to help you protect and preserve what you have worked so hard to gain. Whether you have IRAs to protect, 401ks to preserve, or cash in the bank, our accredited asset management specialists are here to support you. Call now and we'll send you urgent information regarding changes to the dollar and challenges to our economy that you need to be prepared for. Learn how easy it is to roll over your current IRA or 401k into a physical precious metals IRA. We can even arrange to have your precious metals stored in a private vault or send it directly to your home. Do not delay. Call 888-747-3309 or register online at cornerstoneassetmetals.com today. Invest in precious metals and create security in your future today. Call now.
Welcome back. So I wanted to get into that because understanding that we were in kind of like a cycle, I guess is a better way of putting it. Ever since 1971, when we made the adjustment away from gold and we went into this fake paper fiat world, then that kind of changed things. Now, granted, we had 30 years, 40 years plus to run it out. And we did. So when I say 300 billion and now we're to the tune of trillions, do you know we bailed out the world in 2008? We bailed out the world to the tune of like $10 trillion. People don't know, that's impossible. No, we did. We did swap lines, meaning we would print currency, they would print currency, we'd swap it, use the currencies from the other country, and then buy bonds that were created out of thin air to buy bonds that were created out of thin air. Bonds, remember, are just an IOU. So we gave loans out on a cheap dollar. Now the dollar is really expensive, and these people now to go pay back that loan, it's costing them astronomical amount more money to pay the loan back. So honestly, it was a pretty brilliant move because we've basically enslaved the world to the dollar. Here, I'll loan you $5 billion when the dollar was valued at 70. Now the dollar is valued at 100. Try to pay that back. You're going to be paying $8 billion back, right? To buy the dollar to pay it back. That's not going to work. And I don't really believe the world's going to lie down and just kind of let us do it. Hence why I believe there's a war of some kind, some form of distraction. That's why I believe they're dividing us socially. That's why I believe we have the civil discourse that we do. It has nothing to do with what they say. Just doesn't. It has to do with global socialism, but more importantly, probably a distraction. That if we go to war and have social unrest in the United States, it's a perfect mix to hide the collapse of the dominance of the dollar. And that's where I'm kind of getting here. So the IMF basket, prior to the Chinese coming in October, was made up of a handful of currencies. Now, this particular basket is an image today, where you'll see the yellow at 41% is the US dollar. Now, folks, you think the dollar was the reserve king dollar, right? The reserve currency. No, 41% of the world uses the dollar as reserve. That's it. The other 60% is going somewhere else. Now, you have a small fraction going to the euro, going to the yen, going to the British pound, and now we have the Chinese yuan. Now, they have the Chinese yuan down here right now about 11%. I'm here to say the yuan is going to be a lot more than 11 in the future, and it has to come from somewhere. The 11 already did, and it came from the euro and some of the other currencies. So know that the dollar's day is definitely numbered. It's just a matter of when. So in my way of thinking, if we know sooner or later we're going to have a reckoning in our system, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a chunk of protection and preservation in a form of tangible asset? So that way we don't have to worry about, is it going to be in the morning when we wake, right? So this particular basket is what it is today. The International Monetary Fund reserve currency system is made up of these currencies. And the world shares these currencies when they go to do international, let's just say, trading. So if China wanted to buy, that's funny, China buy a TV from anyone. Let's do this. Let's say if Italy wanted to buy a television from Brazil. They would first go buy an American dollar, then they would do the transaction. But that's changing because now they can buy a euro and do the transaction, or they can buy a yuan. So what I'm contending is that the SDR, which is the strategic drawing right of the International Monetary Fund, it's kind of like a unit of currency that they use. I'm contending the SDR is going to be the next global currency. I'm even contending that when the next big collapse happens, which is sooner than you think, I believe they're going to bring an SDR stimulus package, multi-trillion-dollar stimulus package to the world to reinvigorate the economies again. So the SDR is kind of where we're going. Now, the IMF special drawing right, as you see here, the basket of currencies. This, at the time, this was in 2015. The green was the United States. We had 47%. The euro had 32%. And then, of course, you had your pound and you had your yen. This stuff is changing radically. And what's even worse is when you see how the voting rights of the IMF form more than 16%, which gives them a veto power. And those particular countries just so happen to be BRIC, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They have a voting right that has now exceeded the point where they can veto. And folks, if they can veto, watch out, dollar. So I believe the SDR is a very important thing to pay attention to. You see here is a nice little graph of just how the basket of currencies are made up. So we needed the Chinese permission to do this, of course. And now these are the leading nations of the strategic drawing right, or the IMF basket. And so keep that in mind, because we have to go forward understanding that the Chinese aren't just, let's just say, slowly coming in. This is big, and this is going to be quick, and they're setting up the foundation for it. So I want you to be prepared, because what they're trying to tell you mainstream is not what's really happening globally, and we're going to get into a lot more of that with the Silk Road and other pieces of information. So before I get going and do that, I want to do this. Just continue to stay focused. Continue to remain with an idea of diversification. We need to be protected and preserved within the church and within the body of Christ in the United States. So it's important that we just focus on making sure we're properly diversified. That's a good place to get started. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Terrorism, a volatile stock market, rising food costs, natural disasters. Every day our economy is at risk, but your assets should not be. Cornerstone Asset Metals is here to help you protect and preserve what you have worked so hard to gain. Whether you have IRAs to protect, 401ks to preserve, or cash in the bank, our accredited asset management specialists are here to support you. Call now and we'll send you urgent information regarding changes to the dollar and challenges to our economy that you need to be prepared for. Learn how easy it is to roll over your current IRA or 401k into a physical precious metals IRA. We can even arrange to have your precious metals stored in a private vault or send it directly to your home. Do not delay. Call 888-747-3309 or register online at cornerstoneassetmetals.com today. Invest in precious metals and create security in your future today. Call now.
Welcome back. So we talk about the IMF and strategic drawing rights. If we could put it in kind of a cartoon visual for you, the Chinese are not doing this as, let's just say, well, they are to an extent to be global players, but they're looking to take over. I mean, it's just typical of any empire, especially a communist. But look at this image here. This is a great example of it, okay? We all have played with this game before, right? Where the balls just kind of go through, and as you can see, they're kicking out the United States dollar from the world system. Now, don't get me wrong, I know the dollar is still dollar. It'll still be global supremacist. It will still have the reserve status. It's still going to be good. Problem is, it won't be as dominant, and if it's not as dominant with all of our debt and obligation, that's the problem. So from our quality of life point of view, that's kind of where this is going. So what I want to do is just give you kind of a visual of the global GDP, which is your gross domestic product, what you produce, versus the IMF strategic drawing right currency basket. So they're kind of saying, well, depending on what you produce, you're going to have a certain percentage of the reserve currency. And this is kind of where this image comes in. But what they're really gaming on is adopting the IMF as the control unit. And folks, as soon as they adopt the IMF as a control unit, our standard of living in the United States will change overnight. It just will. Now, we may still have a US dollar, but it won't be used internationally. It'll just be for our country. We will see continued inflation, meaning the buying power of our dollar will continue to go down. You're going to find goods and services continue to become more expensive. And I'm stunned today. The average person, I'm stunned at the wages they pay. I mean, hotel workers making $10, $11 an hour. It's an average good wage considered. You can't survive off of $10, $11 an hour. You need multiple incomes. Rent is outrageous, let alone, right? So we know the reckoning is coming. We know that the currencies are going through a form of a reset, and believe me, as much as it will hurt to see, we, the people, are going to take it on the chin because our buying power will continue to erode. And as a good Midwest kid from Detroit, I grew up when we had the luxury of, my parents were General Motors workers, and we had luxury of everything. I mean, a nice little ranch house. We took our 2 vacations a year. Seemed like we got to do what we wanted to do. Obviously there was always times when money was tight, I understand, but it was kind of a normal life. We were middle-class people. I grew up middle class, and it seemed like a decent life. That's changing. And as this evolves, it changes further and gets deeper and harder. And we, the people, have to protect ourselves. That's why I'm such an advocate of tangible assets, especially physical silver. Now, where the Chinese currency comes in here, how we know that they're strategizing for a takeover and not so much just, oh, thank you for letting me in the IMF. Remember, they're communists. Is this strategic choice. Now, if you look at where on this map where they're placing the currency hubs, London, Germany, Luxembourg, France, Singapore, Hong Kong, they're setting up their currencies to be traded and these hubs to transfer. They're setting up to be a global dominant currency to take over. Now remember, they did take over as the world's largest trading nation. They surpassed the United States. So this is already in the works. My concern is a lot of professionals believe, oh, this is 20 years down the road. Folks, I'm not so sure about that. I really don't believe it's 20 years. I think it could be a matter of a year, maybe sooner, the starting of it. Something's coming. And it's odd because I can't put the finger on it as far as timing goes, but I know it's so close that for me, it's better to be protected and preserved now than it is to wait and react later. Now, how do we know beyond just a couple covers or maybe some good analysis per se? Well, here's an article right here, CBS News. United Nations proposes a new global currency. Now, this came out right after the 2008 collapse. I call it the biggest depression. It really was. They just don't want you knowing that. But they tell you in this article, they're talking about that there should be a new global currency. They already started setting the ground rules. Now, I give the United States credit, by the way. Giving loans out to the world like they did, locking people down with mega billion-dollar loans at a real cheap dollar, and now the dollar is stronger, it's brilliant because we kind of have them where we can control them. The problem is the petrodollar is going down, and it's Russia, China, and others right in the middle of that. Now, many people not so sure what that means, but I'm just here to tell you what we're going to show you. But it really means the dollar's ability to dominate is gone. And at 20 trillion in debt now, well, it'll be 22 trillion probably overnight. now that we've raised the debt ceiling. 22 trillion now, 23 trillion keeps going. We now are vulnerable because these nations, especially China, own our debt. Back in the day, we the people owned the debt. Now the world owns the debt. So again, it goes back to The Economist. We showed, a little way back. They are forecasting this. This was 1988 and they forecasted it. And that's a phoenix standing on a burning pile of cash with a medallion on its neck saying 2018. Pretty astonishing. Now, I'm not a fan that the elites are always going to get their way. They're Luciferians. So my guess is we, the people, especially in the kingdom, if we are focused and understand this, we could pray against it and, better yet, take steps to protect ourselves. And a good friend of mine said one time, I said, Terry, a very successful individual, he said, Terry, you can't stop this from happening. But what you can do is be on the right side of the fence. It's pretty brilliant when you think about it. If they're going to do this, if the next phase of a collapse is going to be a huge expansion of printed fake currencies, the best place you could be at that time would be in a tangible asset like silver. It will go back to the highs again, which is a couple 100% return, but at least you're not caught. My biggest concern is that you're going to be caught in a stock market that's collapsing and you didn't get out in time, and you're not in silver or something that can protect you, and the premiums and the price skyrocket. So you miss on both ends. It just, if anything, start hedging. As an old financial advisor, we would even tell clients as they're profiting, take 25% off the table at a certain point. Take another 25% off the table at another point. Take another 25% off the table, leave the remaining 25% till the sky blows, and then take it off. That way you've locked down a big chunk of your gain. And I would say that's probably the case right now for most people in the stock market. So, the International Monetary Fund, the strategic drawing rights, which is the currency unit of the IMF, is the future. And it's right here, right now. That's why last October the Chinese were put into it. So don't underestimate what I'm saying, because the Chinese know. And I did this, to end this on purpose. That's a beautiful bar of gold. But we're going to get into showing you in the next few weeks here where China stands. But there's a reason our gold and silver is leaving. And where is it going? China. And there's a reason their people are buying. I just say, we the people, let's wake up. Let's get protected. Let's stick with constitutional money, silver, biblical money, silver, and let's get ourselves at least hedged properly for what is to come. So until next time, God bless each and every one of you. May your eyes and ears be open to the truth.